I know we've done this before, but I thought we'd do it again. Like the last bedtime lesson was about pollen, this one is about hay fever. Let's see how many parts we got in this one. Wow, 4 parts to this lesson. What is hay fever? Hay fever, also known as seasonal allergic rhinitis, is an allergy caused by pollen grains released during the pollen season, which normally runs from March to November in the UK. Number 2. Hay fever symptoms. Common hay fever symptoms include sneezing, runny or blocked nose, itchy eyes, mouth and throat. Less common hay fever symptoms are headaches and hives. Next. Pollen count. The pollen count is literally the amount of pollen per cubic meter observed over 24 hours. It is sometimes used interchangeably with the term pollen forecast, but the pollen count is used, along with what the weather is up to forecast pollen levels over the coming days. The forecast is actually a forecast of the risk of the level of the pollen over the coming days. When is the pollen count considered high? This depends on the type of pollen, but once counted, the number of particles is represented by per cubic meter. The symptoms usually appear when the pollen count exceeds over 50. Grass is a reading between 50 and 150 grains of grass pollen per cubic meter is considered high. And birch is a reading between 81 and 200. It is high. While this is how they define a high reading, it's worth noting that different people have different tolerance to different pollen types and counts, so some will be more sensitive than others. Relief. Hay fever relief. Although it is very difficult to avoid exposure to pollen, there are a number of measures you could take that would help you to minimize exposure and ease to the severity of your hay fever symptoms. Our second part is, when is hay fever season? Tree pollen occurs first, typically from late March to mid-May. Grass, which actually has 2 peaks, lasts from mid-May until July, and weed pollen covers the end of June to September. Tree pollen occurs first, and affects around 25% of people. Most people are allergic to grass pollen, which actually has 2 peaks. Weed pollen can be released at any time, but the season typically covers the end of June to September. However, depending upon where you live in the UK, the hay fever season will start at different times. For example, there's a later start and shorter season in the north of the UK, where generally there is less pollen. Urban areas have lower counts than the countryside, and places inland have higher ones than around the coast. If we look at grass pollen, the peak across England and Wales, for example, usually starts in the first 2 weeks of June. There are 2 peaks though, with the second, lower peak occurring in the first 2 weeks of July, after which things tail off slowly. These peaks may be masked how wet, dry, warm or cold it is. And the timing of the peaks very much depends on the weather during spring and early summer. There are also loads of factors that change the start of the pollen season. Low temperatures in winter will keep plants and trees dormant for longer into the new year. Essentially, the lower the temperature, the less pollen is produced. But this can change if soil and air temperatures in spring are higher than normal. Spring rainfall is also key, as a dry season reduces the amount of pollen reproduction. Regardless of the weather, pollen is also dependent on how hardy different species are and how well they cope with a mixture of different types in one region. Now, how does the weather affect it? The weather plays a significant role in the production, distribution, and dispersion of pollen. Rain, wind, temperature, and sunshine all affect how much pollen will be produced and how much will it be dispersed. Rainfall. Any rainfall causes a marked decrease in pollen concentration in the air, but the time and amount that it rains during the day is very important. Early, heavy, and prolonged rain is likely to keep the counts low all day, whereas rain in the afternoon will have a less of an impact. Temperature. That plays an important part in the release of it. For grass, a maximum temperature between 18 and 28 degrees Celsius could give a high count if it's a dry day with a low humidity and a gentle breeze. Trees respond best when the temperature range is between 13 and 15 degrees Celsius. However, if the temperature rises above 28 degrees Celsius, then all the pollen levels decrease. If several warm days occur in a row, then the supply of pollen can run out altogether. Wind. When it comes to wind, then it all gets a bit more complicated. If the wind is too light, the pollen will barely get off the ground to be dispersed. But if it's too windy, the pollen gets blown further afield and thins out significantly. Different types of pollen will need different wind speeds for ideal dispersion. But birch pollen, for example, need moderate to high winds. Sunlight. The amount of daylight, or the photoperiod, is also crucial to pollen production because of photosynthesis. If there's a particularly cloudy spell of weather, then plants and trees will produce less pollen because they are getting less light. What will climate change do to pollen patterns? It's like a change in climate will impact pollen patterns in at least 3 ways. 1. A change in climate will mean that changes in temperature and rainfall may lengthen the UK pollen season and potentially make pollen concentrations higher. 2. It's possible that climate change will lead to changes in the potency of pollen on a single pollen particle can have varying amounts of allergy-causing agent on it. And 3. The UK is also facing a threat from changes in the geographical distribution of allergenic plants due to climate change, with invasive species such as ambrosia or common ragweed being on the watch list. A single ragweed plant can produce 1 billion grains of pollen per season, and its pollen causes strong allergic reactions. Wow! Our third part of this lesson is about how hay fever affects pets. Did you know that pets can suffer from pollen allergies like humans? Summer days can bring about high pollen counts, which can mean irritation and misery for not just humans who suffer with it, but their 4-legged friends with allergies as well. Symptoms. While the cause of the allergies is the same in pets as it is in humans, the signs can be a little different. In humans, you may expect a runny nose, watery eyes, and a feeling short of breath. But these signs are much rarer in our pets. Here are some of the signs that may show if they are allergic to pollen. Licking or biting their paws, excessive scratching, redness on the skin, especially around the eyes and ears and in between the paws, shaking their head, rubbing their ears or muzzle, tired, particularly on days when the pollen count is high. If you notice your pet is showing any of these signs, particularly during summer, take them to your vet. Some of the symptoms above can also be signs of other health issues, so your vet might want to rule these out before treating your pet for allergies. If an allergy is diagnosed, we don't always know what the cause is. However, if it's a seasonal, like worse in summer and better winter, then that usually means it's at least partly due to pollen. Treatment. If your pet is diagnosed with an allergy to pollen, your vet may recommend some medication to help or manage your symptoms during the summer months. Because your pet might have allergies to more than one thing, your vet might also advise you to try a food elimination trial to rule out an allergy to anything in their diet. Your vet can give you a specific advice and support on how to do this, as it's not always as simple as switching to a different food. A specialist's prescription diet must be fed exclusively. It's important not to try home remedies before checking with your vet, or to give any medication to your pet without a prescription, as many of these can be dangerous in the wrong doses or for some certain species. And our final part of this lesson is about surviving hay fever. Following a relatively mild winter and for some recent fine warm weather, there we are. Hay fever, also known as seasonal allergic rhinitis, is an allergic reaction to pollen. It can be triggered by allergens in the air around us, like grass, tree, plant pollen, and mold. Between May and July, during the traditional growing season, trees and plants create more pollen. And this, together with warmer, more humid temperatures and winds, can bring about a spike in our symptoms. To make matters worse, unseasonably mild winters, warm springs and dry summers in recent years have led to plants growing more vigorously and a longer, stronger growing season,